Hello everyone, and welcome back to my little cozy corner of the internet. I hope you're all doing incredibly well. It is just the most beautiful day outside, so I figured I would share with you guys my recent reads. I realized just the other day that I actually haven't shared with anybody on YouTube what I've been reading over the last few months, so sorry about that. I slack with YouTube so hard and I'm so sorry. I have 11 books that I'll be sharing with you. I am a very slow reader. I'm definitely not one of those girls who will just sit down and read a 300-400 page book in a day or two. It takes me like a week to finish a book usually, so I am not the best bookish, booktuber, bookstagram person to follow, but you know, that's okay. I also wanted to note that I will be covering a few controversial topics in this video, so if you're not into that, you can skip it or just pretend like it never happened. Hopefully not all of you hate me by the end of it. But I'm going to try to give like the tiniest, briefest synopsis of each book before I cover it, but I don't want to go too far into it because I know I already talked about most of these in my 2023 hopefuls video, I think it was called. But basically books I want to read by the end of the year. And this was like a huge chunk of them, so I'm actually really excited. I think I only have like 3, maybe 4 books on that list that I haven't read yet, and there's still like a month and a half left in the year. So I'm just gonna jump on in with books that I've read recently. So the first one that I read is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, and I've seen this all over the place on Bookstagram and everything like that since I really started watching the bookish community. This was a really cute book. It was very cozy and whimsical and sweet and cute, but it just felt very flat for me. I was so bored. This is my very first book ever that has kind of like quote-unquote witchy vibes. I kind of avoid that for like personal reasons, like religious reasons, but I feel like I have to clarify that I try to avoid books that talk about like the real craft instead of like fantasy, if that makes sense. And this story is about this town that leaves a child in the woods once a year. They think that they're sacrificing it to this witch who protects their town or something like that when they sacrifice a child. But the reality is there's this witch in the woods that just keeps finding babies, and so she takes them and she feeds them starlight to keep them healthy, and she takes them across the woods to a different town where people want children. And so there's one instance when she takes this baby and instead of feeding it starlight, she was so tired she accidentally fed the child moonlight, the girl who drank the moon, and it gave her some kind of like special powers. And yeah, it's very cute. It's a fun like concept, but I just felt like it wasn't told very excitingly. It was definitely very middle grade. I don't know if that's maybe why I didn't like it so much, but I just couldn't relate to any of the characters. The plot was really slow and boring, and like nothing exciting happened until like the last 50-ish pages of the book. I will say that Firion, I think that's how you say his name, the little pet dragon right here, so cute and funny. And then Glurk, who was a swamp monster that was also in the story. He was like the wise uncle, I guess you could say. He had a lot of wisdom to share, and he actually shared a lot of biblical allegories, which I was really surprised by. But yeah, I don't know. I think I just ended up giving this 2 stars, I think. Again, it is a beautiful story. It's a fun concept, but I was just so bored. And the only character that I found interesting was Anton's wife. Anton is one of the main characters, but then we only got her for like 2 pages total out of the whole book. So yeah, just wasn't my taste. I'm sorry, I know so many people love this book, but I was just so bored. I don't think I'm gonna be able to go in order because there's like 4 of them. I cannot remember what the order I read them in, and I don't feel like going through my Instagram and finding out. So I think the next book that I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, and this just looks like a fun summer romance, doesn't it? But this follows our main character, Olive. She's a sassy Latina who lives in Minnesota. So it was fun being able to relate to a lot of that. Olive is going to be the maid of honor in her sister's wedding, and then the best man is her arch nemesis Ethan. And at the wedding, everybody ends up getting food poisoning except for Olive and Ethan. And then of course there's a honeymoon hanging in the balance, and they can't let that go to waste. So even though Olive and Ethan hate each other, they decide to take the honeymoon together. And it was just so fun and funny. I laughed out loud so many times. I also cringed a couple times, which I'll talk about in a second. But overall, this was a really fun summery romance. I definitely recommend this to anybody who just likes rom-coms, because it was just a total rom-com. It was so cute. There was a slow burn and it was so cute. Now, the thing that I didn't like, however, was number one, I could not for the life of me figure out why Olive hated Ethan so much. Like, he would literally compliment her and she would be like, oh my god, he's the spawn of Satan. Like, he was actually such a good bookish boyfriend. Like, he was so sweet and so nice. Like, he would say something snarky every once in a while, but it was usually in reply to something Olive had said first. So like, I just could not figure out why she hated him so much. That didn't make any sense to me. The second thing that I didn't love, and this is kind of like semi-controversial, I guess, but there was just such a strong underlying feminist theme that I just did not love. Like, feminism to me is like, you value both men and women, and you just, as a woman, you really want to bring to light your strength. Like, to me, that's feminism. But this was very like, not that way. And there are two instances that really bothered me. One was when they got to the hotel and Ethan was like, oh, you can take the bed, and she was like, is it just because I'm a woman? Like, can you just say thank you and move on with it? Like, that was so unnecessary. And then the second comment that she made was like, a few days later they were snorkeling or whatever, and Ethan kind of like checked her out, you know, and she was like, I can love my body and still want to smash the patriarchy. Can we just not have comments like this? Like, I don't know, I want to immerse myself into worlds. When I read someone like modern kind of things fling up like that, it's really obnoxious to me, especially because I love traditional romance. Like, I'm all about the old school traditional kind of stories. So when stuff like that comes up, I'm like, can you just let him swoop you off your feet? If I wanted to read like a feminist rom-com, like, that's what I would look for, but that's just not what I was looking for when I picked this up. I also gotta say, I love the character development of Olive. I think the way I put it in my Instagram caption was like, she went from poor me to yay me, and I really loved it, because one of the themes before they leave was Olive always gets bad luck with everything, and so she kind of went from like this mindset of I always have bad luck to like, no, like, I can make good decisions and that can lead to good things in my life. And I just really love that. Like, that is a good like feminist message, you know what I mean? It's weird saying that, but like, you know what I mean? And then I also love that it was a big story about accepting the consequences of your actions, because Olive makes a few dumb choices, and I love that everything wasn't just like handed to her in the end. She actually had to like fight for things and suffer the consequence of a few things as well. And then I also love that we got more of the story after they got back from the honeymoon, because obviously there was like a slow burn, but then like stuff happens. And then afterwards, when they were back in Minnesota from Hawaii, they got to go through some things, and it was just really nice being able to like see the loose ends tied up, if that makes sense. So it didn't just like end with them being in Hawaii living happily ever after. They actually had to go through stuff after, which I really loved seeing. And then the last thing that I didn't like was Olive's family. So this is a closed door romance. There's no spice. It alluded to a few things after they'd been kissing, you know, but it wasn't like gross. But Olive's family was gross. I don't know, it was just so weird, because this seemed like a wholesome, funny romance, and then I think it was before and after they went to Hawaii, Olive's family would just like make really gross, crass comments, and it just felt so out of place because the story wasn't like that between Olive and Ethan. So I just didn't love that. It kind of threw it off for me. So I think I ultimately ended up giving this a 4 out of 5, maybe a 4.5 out of 5. Like I said, I'm not checking my Instagram captions to check. Yeah, I recommend if you like funny rom-com stories, because this was really fun. Oh my gosh, Harmony, you need to talk less. You're already filming for like 11 minutes. You need to chill. The next book that I read, I think, is The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walter. And this was just another really fun summery romance book. This follows our main character, Claire, right? Claire? No, dang it, Meredith. Her sister's name is Claire. So Meredith has a sister named Claire who sadly passed away a year and a half ago, and she is really having a hard time with it because they were really super close. And her family does this annual trip to, I think, the vineyard? Yeah, the vineyard every year. So they're gonna go on this trip for a wedding, and it's been really hard on Meredith to be there without her sister. And then she kind of has to deal with feeling a little bit guilty because she ends up meeting a guy there that she ends up really falling for, and it's super cute. But there's like this giant game of some kind that they all play. Meredith forms an alliance with a cute groomsman. She finds herself getting distracted. Meredith tries to focus on the game and win it for her sister, but she can't help falling for him. And as the week progresses, she realizes she's not only at risk of losing the game, but also her heart. It was super cute. I think I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 because it was very much it was very much insta-love, and I'm a slow burn girly. So not only did they fall really fast, but they also got intimate really fast, which I didn't love. This is closed doors, so you don't get any of like the details. It just, again, alludes to some stuff, but I just wasn't a fan of the insta-love kind of a thing. And then I also found some of the side characters and side stories hinted at to be really incredibly unnecessary. It kind of alluded at some stuff happening in their lives, and it was just kind of like really pointless and didn't tie into the story at all, so it was more of like just distracting side stories, I guess. I did love the romance overall, but I also love that there was a lot of twists and turns to it. I will say, like, one of the things that was kind of revealed at the end, it was kind of like, what? Because the guy's name is Wit, by the way, and he makes a really dumb choice at the end that didn't really make much sense. So I think that was also kind of why I dropped the rating a little bit. But overall, it was a really fun summer romance, and there were a few cross comments from side characters again that I didn't love, but overall it was really fun and cute and I liked it. The next book that I read was, okay, hang on, I need coffee. I made a latte and put a little bit of maple syrup in there. Ooh, that's good. Next book, Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. I really dislike this book. I gave this one, I think, 2 out of 5 stars. So this was, I think it was, why can't I think of the word, advertised as like a thriller, mystery thriller kind of a thing. This was just like the least mystery-y, thriller-y book ever, and it was so not entertaining. Now I will say that I did end up reading this in like a day, but it's because I had cramps really bad and decided to stay in bed all day, so I think I was just in the reading mood, not because it was a good book. But this follows our 2 main characters that I literally cannot even remember the name of. Oh no. Oh, Lux. Her name was Lux. Okay. So we got Lux and Nico. They live in Hawaii together. They're dating. And Nico is like a tour guide person that gives tours on his boat. And then Lux works at a hotel. And they have dreams of sailing the world together, but they're both broke, so they don't know what they're gonna do. And then 2 girls come along. I think their names are like Brittany and something else. I don't know. But they're like, hey, we'll pay you $50,000 if you take us to this island, which is famous from Moby Dick. And so they were like, okay, cool. $50,000, that's gonna get our boat fixed and we can sail for a long time. So they end up doing it, and then there ends up being like weird stuff that happens on the island, like this one random guy that shows up and goes crazy, and then this other couple who's like super rich and like super nice, and like nothing mystery or thrillery happens until like the last 50 pages. Other than that, it's just like explaining their time on the beach and like questions they have about each other, but it wasn't like thrilling. It was just kind of like, okay, you're hanging out in paradise with like these random people, cool. The things that annoyed me was, number 1, Nico was a major red flag. Oh my goodness, he sucked so bad, and it was so annoying that Lux kept making excuse after excuse for him, and it was driving me insane. Also note that if you decide to read this, you can skip the first chapter. I legit almost quit after the first chapter because it was so gross and unnecessary and weird. It was basically a day in Lux's life of cleaning a hotel room, and they find things, and it was just so weird. Like, really all you need to know is that she works in a hotel, and then you can skip chapter 1 and she gets fired. So yeah, skip that. There's also an outrageous amount of swearing in this book, like a word every once in a while, like I get it, but this was like literally almost every sentence was like dropping the F-bomb, and it was just insane to me. To me personally, that's just like a really poor reflection of authorship. Like, you can explain emotions without having to drop that word every single time. So yeah, I just would not recommend this. The last thing too was that at the very end, like the twist was kind of like, okay, like I can kind of predict that, but like, okay. But the ending decision that Lux made just made 0 sense for her character. It was so like it feels like the ending was just made up in the moment. Like when I read thrillers and mysteries, I want the ending to be something like, oh wow, like the author had to put a lot of thought into that. Like that was really good. This was just like, oh, I don't really know how to end this, so we're just gonna, you know, like it was just not good. I think the only thing that I really liked out of this book was that they did talk a lot about therapy and how therapy can be really helpful. And one of like the mantras that I think it was Lux had was living in the after. So like when you go through a tragedy and you have to realize that like you survived that and you're strong and you can get through things, and you just have to remember to live in the after. So aside from that though, I really just didn't like this book. I thought it was such a waste of time and just not fun, not exciting, was gross and weird. There were also a lot of affairs that happened, which was really weird. And it was just, yeah, I wouldn't. The next book is called Well Met by Jen DeLuca, and I loved this book so much. It was so good. It was so cute, and I loved it. I loved it. So our main character, Emily, she just went through a really horrible breakup, and then she's gonna go live with her sister because not only did she go through this breakup, but then her sister also just got in a really bad car accident, so she kind of needs to be taken care of. So Emily moves in with her sister, and then she also has her niece there, Caitlin, who's adorable, and she's going to be volunteering at their local Ren Fest, and her teacher is in charge of it, and his name is Simon. And Simon is kind of a jerk. He's really like, how do you say it, like dry sense of humor, like just not a fun guy, like just very serious. He's an English teacher and like really academic, and you know what I mean? It was such a slow burn because Emily ends up having to volunteer with her because obviously her sister can't do it from being in that accident. So it was just, I don't know, it was just so fun. And I am a major Renfest nerd. We go every year and we dress up, and I love it. So it was really fun being back in that world for a while, and it was really cool seeing Emily and Simon getting to know each other both in character and like trying to figure out what was part of their character and what was real, and then being out of character, and Emily being like, okay, like is the way you feel about me here the same here? And it was just so fun, and I just loved it. It was such a slow burn and so cute and romantic and fun and funny, and I just had a good time. One of my least favorite things that happens in books, and I don't know if you would call this a trope, but miscommunication. Like it drives me insane and I hate it so much. And so I was kind of worried that was going to be part of it because like being in a character and out of character, but it actually ended up being like the opposite. Like one of the themes was literally Emily talking about how communication is so necessary and to like not hold anything back and just to be open about things. And so that actually ended up being really cool because she would struggle with something, and then instead of me reading about it and getting anxiety of her not telling Simon, she would literally just talk to him about it, and it made things so much better. Simon is, I loved him as a bookish boyfriend. He was so cute, and he was just so dreamy, and he was smart and masculine and handsome, and I just loved it. I will say though that I did actually pick up this book last summer, and I ended up putting it down after 70 pages because Emily was so rude and annoying, and she would make comments that really annoyed me, and it was just, I did not like her. But the further you get into the story, the better it gets, and it ends up being really cute, and there's more than just like the romance. They talk about their past and some tragedy that has happened and personal growth, and it was just so cute, and I really liked it. However, there is a little bit of spice in there, which is why I ended up dropping the rating. I think I ended up giving this either 4 or 4.5 out of 5 because of that. But I will say that it's not like raunchy, nasty, grimy smut. It was very like, I don't want to say appropriate because I don't think that smut is appropriate ever, but it was more tastefully done. It wasn't like over the top nasty. It was just like laid out really like, I don't know if realistic is the word for it, but it was just, it wasn't the worst I've ever read. We'll just put it that way. I actually didn't mind it. Like I didn't love it, but I was just kind of like, okay, like I've read worse. So it was actually okay, and especially because they built up such a good relationship before it ended up happening, that made it a little bit better. Doesn't justify it in my eyes, but it still made it a little more tolerable. So I did really like this one. I know that there's more that I'm forgetting to say. Yeah, it's just really cute and fun and a good summary read, especially if you're a Renfest nerd like I am, but I do recommend this. It was a good time, and I laughed and I cried actually. I cried a couple times because it's really cute, but yeah, I definitely really like this one a lot. The next book I cannot say the same, and that would be What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. I had high hopes for this one, and I was let down. I think I ended up giving this one 2.5 or 3 out of 5. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the ratings that I gave these books. I didn't really love this one. So this follows our 3 main characters. Technically one main character is written in her perspective. I think her name's Naomi. But she and her 2 friends were in the woods when they were little, and there ended up being an attack, and Naomi was physically attacked, and she was actually like permanently scarred on her face really badly, and they ended up sending a man to prison because of that. Now, years and years later, when they're adults, it ends up coming out that one of them was lying about what happened, and they may or may not have sent the wrong man to prison. And it is a really like interesting and thrilling concept, you know, like that sounds really good, but I just don't think that it was executed very well. Most of this book I was actually really bored, and this was another case where like there was a lot of swearing and like weird side comments that I just found to be unnecessary. But I did love that there were a lot of different themes. Like this did go along with like the murder mystery, but there were also references of like mythology, and then there were references of like mental health and psychology and all of these fun different like little side themes, which I think actually played into it really well. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but I feel like it just kind of dragged on the main point a lot. There were a few suspects in this one, so it was kind of fun to go back and forth on who it was, because there were like at least 2 people that I was like, okay, it's definitely this person, and then like, okay, no, wait, no, it's definitely that person. So it was kind of fun to go back and forth on that, but at the ending made it kind of squanched it a little bit for me, if that's the right way to put it, but it was kind of almost semi-satisfying, if that makes sense. There were a lot of great one-liners in this book, and there's also like a kind of small romance that happens, a little bit of a slow burn, and it was closed door, but it does allude to some things. I think the main thing that bothered me about this book was Naomi. Her character sucked so bad. Like, I understand that trauma definitely changes a person. I've been through tons of trauma in my life, but like, at the end of the day, you kind of decide what you have to do with it, and she chose the wrong path in my opinion. She became kind of a sucky person. I don't love the way that she treats people. I don't like the way that she talks to people or about people, and I really didn't like her, and that's kind of what dragged the rating down the most for me, I think, because I'm very character driven. I want to be able to relate to main characters and go through the story with them, and with this I just couldn't, because I could not stand Naomi. She does have quite a bit of character development towards the end, but I wouldn't say that it was necessarily worth it for me. And then the last 2 things was, number 1, there was a lot of swearing in this book, and to me the main annoying thing about that was that everybody's favorite swear word was Jesus or Jesus Christ, and that's a no for me. I really don't like that, and it's every time I read it I just rolled my eyes, and I don't like excessive swearing in the first place, but then when you use like my Lord and Savior's name in vain, when you could choose from so many other different words, that's just a no-go for me, and I just really didn't like it. And then the last thing that just was really annoying to me was you could very well pick up the author's political take on things, which was really annoying. Again, when I read a book, I want to be immersed. I don't want to think about politics or modern trending events. I don't want to hear about it. And I could very well tell which side of the bird that this author sits on, and I just did not love it. So that was really annoying to me, and I just personally would not recommend this one. It wasn't fun, it wasn't thrilling, the main character sucked. It was kind of sort of predictable. Like, it was predictable enough that it wasn't satisfying. So I don't know, I didn't love it. Wouldn't recommend. Moving on. I just realized that I forgot a book because I don't have a physical copy of it anymore because I disliked it that much. So we're on kind of a negative roll right now. The next book that I read was Buried in a Good Book by Tamara Berry, and this book was so bad. I'm sorry. I know that there's actually a lot of people who really loved this book and that it was so much fun, and I did not have a good time. This follows our main character, Tess Harrow, who is an author of like mystery thriller books, and she just went through a recent divorce, so she takes her daughter Gertie to a cabin in the woods to kind of like reset and move on, you know? And it sounded really fun. It talks about how like she's a mystery thriller author, and she goes to this town where there was just like this murder or something, and then like Bigfoot has been spotted in the woods, and a tiger, and I think they're in like the Pacific Northwest, so it's like oh my gosh, there's like all these fun things, right? No. First of all, Tess is the most annoying female main character I've ever seen in my entire life. She tried so hard to be Lorelai Gilmore and it just did not work out. I was so annoyed by all of her jokes. I didn't think they were funny. She was rude and annoying and disrespectful, and I just could not stand her. She was one of those people that came off like, if you live a different life than me and have different opinions, then you're a moron and I'm better than you. And it was just, I could not do it. Could not stand her. Unfortunately, I did not DNF. I forced myself to finish, which I need to stop doing. Her daughter Gertie, 15 years old, I understand you're gonna have some teen angst, but oh my gosh, if I would have talked to my parents the way that Gertie talked to Tess, I would be unalive right now. We'll just put it that way. It was mind-blowing. I also thought it was really odd that like her daughter wants to be like a chef and this cook, and they're staying in this cabin that doesn't have any power, and somehow her daughter was making like gourmet meals every night. So like that was weird. I don't know if this is going to be considered a spoiler or not, so just take this as you will, but the romance that's kind of hinted throughout the whole entire book that you were like waiting for the slow burn to like spark goes nowhere. Nothing happens. The Bigfoot sighting wasn't really explained. The villain at the end, it ended up being somebody who was not even really in the story at all, so it didn't make any sense for that to be the case. Like, I feel like it could have been a really good twist had that person been in more of the book, but they weren't in it enough for it to make sense, so that was annoying. I just didn't like this book. Nothing made sense. There was a second villain that was also revealed, and that just like went nowhere and wasn't explained, and it was just not a fun time. Again, I forced myself to finish, and I wish I would have DNF'd because it was just such a waste of time, and I'm so glad that it's over, and it was not a good time, so yeah. Anyway, the next book unfortunately was also not a good one for me, which is so sad because it is such a beautiful book, and that would be The Foxglove King by Hannah Whitten. I learned my lesson from the last book, and I actually did decide to DNF this after 200 pages, so I pretty much like made a really good dent in it because this book is about 465 pages, but I could not bring myself to finish it for several reasons. First, I just want to say, and this is kind of where the start of my controversial takes come into place, but I want to start off by saying that I have a tremendous amount of religious trauma. I was actually part of a religious cult, fun fact, and I've actually been through a lot. I deconstructed my faith. I've been through Christianity, I've been through Wicca, I've been through different kinds of Christianity, and now I'm kind of in a place where I believe the Bible and I trust in Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and I'm growing as a believer, and that's kind of where I would put myself. So I'm not coming at this from somebody who doesn't understand or can't empathize with the author, so I just wanted to put that out there. But this book was a blatant mockery of Catholicism, and I just found it to be really distasteful. I'm not Catholic, so this is not coming from like I'm an offended kind of thing, but it was more so like this just came off as incredibly disrespectful because this was not built on facts from the Catholic faith. This was solely built on stereotypes, and I found that to be really messed up and not appropriate, and I really did not enjoy it. When I first picked it up, I was really excited because I love reading about cults. I love reading about that kind of stuff, and I was really excited. And then once I started to get a little more into it, it was like, okay, I get it. Like, this is gonna be like kind of a cultish kind of a thing. And then it just kept pushing and pushing and pushing to the point where it was no longer telling a story, but it got to the point where it was like trying to push an agenda. And I'm just really not okay with that, especially when it's built on stereotypes. And instead of it being like, hey, the system is not supposed to be like this, let's fix it and let's expose it, instead it was, this is the way the system is. And I just did not love that because it's not true, and it made me really sad. And again, I have been through it with the church, you guys. I have been through it with people in the church, and I think oftentimes those of us who've gone through that kind of forget to separate the church from what faith actually is, and it is just really sad. I just felt too convicted, and I could not finish the book. Like, it was, I had a lot of faith conviction in me, and I just could not bring myself to finish it. Plus, I wasn't enjoying the story as much as I wanted to. I really strongly disliked the main character. Sorry, I did not give a synopsis, but it's really hard to because it's kind of a complicated story, but basically religious cult dealing drugs and royalty somehow spun in there. It's kind of hard to explain. I just could not connect to the main character. She was really rude and annoying and I couldn't stand her. There was no depth to any of the characters. The world building was really weird and complicated. And it was just, I couldn't get over it pushing an agenda about a specific religion, even though it wasn't my religion. You know, I just didn't like that. So I think there are definitely ways for authors to write their feelings about religion. I just didn't feel like this was tastefully done in that way. So yeah, DNF, and do not recommend to anybody who that may trigger in that kind of way. If that doesn't bother you, if you don't mind reading stuff about religious things that aren't true, then by all means have at it, but I just could not read it. So yeah, that was kind of disappointing because the cover is stunning. So yep, that was disappointing. The next book, however, I loved with my whole heart, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this was just such a magical, beautiful story, and I really don't even know what to say other than that, honestly. It was just beautiful. If you saw my vlog, I kind of just poured out all my thoughts and feelings about it in there, so I don't really want to like repeat everything I said, but basically it was cute, it was beautiful, it was just so well written, and it was just a huge biblical allegory, which I love. I love that Tolkien puts so much of his faith and belief in his writing, and I just loved it. I was really surprised at how on par the first like half of it was with the movie. Well, rather the movie was on par with the book. And then I was really shocked that the last half so wasn't. It was so different. I wish that they would have put the book ending in the movie instead, but I digress. But yeah, I loved it. It was cozy, it was beautiful, perfect fall read. I highly recommend, 5 out of 5. I will reread this again in the future, and I don't even know what else to say other than if you're kind of like intimidated by adult, more complex fantasies, definitely watch the movie first, because I don't think I would have kept up very well if I hadn't seen the movies first. So I definitely recommend doing that, but I did love this book so much. And I do approve of Toriel and Legolas being in the movies, even though they weren't in the books. So unpopular opinion, but I'm sticking to it. And yeah, it was just beautiful and Thranduil. Love him. So yeah, if you want more of my thoughts, you can go watch my vlog, but overall I just love this book so much and I definitely recommend. Okay, we're almost done. We've only got 2 books left, and the next one is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is probably one of the most popular dark academia books there's out there, and I cannot figure out why. I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. I'm gonna get controversial in this one, so just wait. This follows 7 students that go to this university called basically like a artsy school. So they're like theater kids and choir kids and all of that kind of stuff. The 7 characters that we are following are Shakespearean students, and trust me, you can tell. And one of them ends up being murdered, and the story is written from Oliver's perspective, who is currently in prison for the murder. Oh my gosh, I have so many problems with this book. So I'll start out with the positive, which is that the first third of the book was actually pretty good. The writing was really good. I really enjoyed getting to know all of the characters. They all had depth. They all had like individual personalities, which I really love, because poor character building will just knock me out of the book every time. Can't stand it. There were also lots of great one-liners, lots of wisdom. Like when you go on Pinterest and you look up this book, there's just like one-liners all over the place there, because there's a lot of really good writing in this book. And that's about all the good that I have to say. Okay, so number 1, we get it. You're Shakespeare students. You don't have to quote him constantly in every single conversation. It was like constant, like all the time you were quoting Shakespeare. Like in a normal conversation, 2 people would be talking and then they would just start like quoting Shakespeare, and it's like, people don't do that. Like even Shakespearean students don't do that. It was really weird and hard to follow and annoying. I did actually end up spoiling this for myself, because just be warned, if you flip to the very, very back, like right here, very back, where there's usually more info about the author, which is what I was looking for. Nope. There was like a discussion piece that shows 10 questions to ask in a group discussion, and one of those questions was, how did you feel about so-and-so murdering so-and-so? So it ended up spoiling it for me, But I will say there is no way that you wouldn't guess who did it, because it is like the most obvious thing ever. They don't even remotely hint at someone else possibly being responsible for the murder. It was so just in your face the whole time. I also would not really consider this dark academia. Like, the most dark academia thing about it was that they're Shakespearean students and it's based in the fall of this old school. That's it. We didn't get any dark academia vibes. We didn't get any like so-and-so putting on their tweed coat and their Oxford shoes, studying in the library. Like, there was a fireplace in their room, but like whatever. But like studying by, you know, the fireplace, or like the lit candles and the old books, like no coffee dates like that. Like, there was just nothing really dark academia outside of them being at the school, which we didn't really get a whole lot of, which was kind of lame. Oliver's family dynamic, because we do get little snippets of him going home for the holidays, was so weird and so unnecessary and just didn't play into the story. I'm sure if you've watched the video this far, you've noticed that I've mentioned a few times, I really just don't like side characters or side stories that don't play any part in the plot, and that's what his family dynamic was, and it was just really weird and unnecessary to be in the story and was just kind of a waste of time. Okay, so for the next few things, I don't think that these are spoilers, because if you look on Goodreads, this is what like all the reviews are talking about, and even, I don't know, I guess even in just other reviews that I've seen, it talks about it, so I don't think this is a spoiler. I apologize if it is, but I really don't think it is. So the main concept of this book was supposed to be what I thought, like a murder mystery. That's kind of what I was going in this expecting. And this whole book is basically just Oliver struggling with his sexuality, which I just did not find to be interesting at all. He's basically struggling between having feelings for this boy and then having feelings for this girl, and is trying to decide which one that he felt like he was supposed to be with, and I just did not find this to be an interesting plot at all. It was just not entertaining. It just was not entertaining. It also didn't make any sense to me, because this felt very much like making Oliver a gay character solely for like the shock value and like because that's what people want to hear. And I say that because the boy character that he had interest in, he didn't have any chemistry with this person at all. He really basically would say that he liked this guy because he was talented and he was just like the guy that he wanted to be because he's handsome and cool, and that's it. Like, it was so surface level, and just there was zero connection and chemistry with the person, and so it didn't make any sense to me why that was being focused on as the main romance. And then with the woman that he was interested in, I was actually rooting for this because they had so much chemistry, there was so much vulnerability, they both like shed tears with each other, they both went through tragedy together, they were both grieving together, and they both like, it was just, there was so much more between him and the woman. To me, I'm like, if you wanted the main romance to be with the guy, then like maybe you should have, I don't know, made it more of a relationship, more romantic, more depth, but there wasn't. And so I was left disappointed because then I felt like the woman in the story, like I just felt so bad for her. And honestly, I can just say her name because you're gonna pick it up anyway, but like Meredith. And honestly, by the end of the book, to me it seemed like Meredith is like the real victim of this story because she was just being toyed with the entire time. And she went through so much tragedy already, and now to have her heart broken again at the very end because there's a twist that happens, and it was so sad, and I felt really bad for her. I was really annoyed that I was going in expecting this to be more of a mystery book, and it ended up being about a college boy struggling with his sexuality, and I just don't find sexuality to be an interesting plot. I don't. So it was just not a fun time for me at all. The mystery wasn't good, it wasn't well structured, the Shakespeare quotes were driving me up a wall. There was just nothing entertaining really in this book for me. I liked the depth of the characters, but really the only one that I wouldn't say connected with, but felt for was Meredith, because she was so open and vulnerable about the things that she went through and how she felt about herself and everything like that. So the controversial part, as if I'm sure that what I just said was already controversial, but the controversial part that I'm going to bring up, and I don't just mean this with this book, I mean this with so many other books. Some of them I've even already talked about today, and especially in like the love hypothesis, oh my gosh. But in this book, there's a character named Alexander, and he is gay, and I'm just so sick of authors being over the top with gay characters and making them all seem like they're so sexually driven and just overtly sexual all the time. I put a poll on Instagram because I wanted to check myself, you know, I'm like, am I being just like judgy, or is this like a thing that authors do? And I think in movies too. And I put up a poll on Instagram and over 90% of people agreed with me, so I know I'm not just crazy. And I actually had a few conversations with people about this too, but this character in this book specifically, he was just so over the top and constantly making sexual jokes. And the thing that really tipped me over the edge with this was when he was talking about being attracted to this boy, and Oliver had said, well, you know that he's not gay, right? And Alexander goes, not yet, he's not. And then made a joke about raping this boy to turn him gay. That is not funny. That is not funny, and I don't think that it's okay to paint gay characters in that light, because I feel like if that was done with a straight character, this book would be getting all kinds of hate. It would be getting it would not be acceptable, you know what I mean? But the fact that it was a gay character, so many people just kind of like laugh it off, and it's like, it's not funny to joke about sexual assault. And yes, I understand that there are definitely gay people who are like that in real life, but not all of them are, and I don't think it's fair to paint them as such. When I checked Goodreads, I realized that there were actually a few people who are part of the LGBT community that were actually really deeply offended by this book because of that. And I completely understand why. I would also be equally annoyed if it was straight characters that were constantly talking like this. I just want to put that out there, but it's just something that I've noticed lately, that it's always gay characters who are painted as just being so over the top and gross. And Malcolm in The Love Hypothesis was also like this, was constantly making jokes, and it's just not funny. I don't think, it's just not my type of sense of humor. You're gonna have readers who maybe don't support the LGBTQ community, and so they're gonna read that, and that's only gonna like push them further away. And when you paint this community in such a negative way, it's not doing you any favors. I have gay friends, I have family members and siblings who are gay, and I love them with my whole heart. I don't treat them any differently than I would treat anybody else, you know. I think it's important to love and respect people no matter what. So yeah, that's kind of my controversial hot take. I was debating whether or not I wanted to talk about this because, of course, it's 2023, people get offended kind of by everything and anything and all of the things. So I hope that I talked about that respectfully enough. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. If you agree or disagree, I could ramble about this for a little bit more, but I'm not going to because I have one more book to cover and this video is already really long. So yeah, moving on to the next one. The next book that I read is A Far Wilder Magic by Allison Saft, and I actually have not talked about this one yet on Instagram, so this is kind of like freshly coming out of me because I have not had time to articulate my thoughts. I actually finished this last night. I think that I'm going to settle on a 3-star for this book, partially because of my expectations that I had for it. So this follows our main characters, Margaret, aka Maggie, and Wes, and they are on a hunt together. Maggie kind of lives by herself, kind of a recluse. Her mother's missing, and she, you know, spends her time with her dog and her horse. She likes to hunt. And then Wes lives in the city with his family, and he is an alchemist, which is kind of hard to explain because there's also a lot of religious systems that goes behind this, but basically it's kind of a kind of magic. But they're in the same town because there's this event going on where you hunt this fox that was made by God, that is some kind of demigod, basically. It's kind of hard to explain. This whole system is really complicated. They end up kind of having a slow burn romance while on this hunt to kill the Hala, which is this white fox. And this book was more marketed as like an adventure kind of a book of them going on this hunt together and a slow burn romance, and so that's kind of what I was expecting. But the hunt literally doesn't take place until like the last 30 pages of the book. So I was really disappointed by that, which kind of dropped my rating quite a bit because I was like waiting the whole time for them to go on this adventure together, and it was just spent most of the time in the house or in the town. So that was kind of like annoying kind of, but I will say that I did love the vibes. It's very like steampunk 1920s vintage kind of a style. also very gloomy. It's like rainy a lot. They live by the seaside, so it had good vibes in that area. I also really liked a lot of the writing. It was very poetic. It kind of reminded me of Shea Earnshaw's writing. It's really beautiful and atmospheric. But I think that the main thing that dropped the rating for me is that you couldn't really tell this was fantasy. It was mainly focused on like prejudice, which was not what I was expecting. And I think the annoying part for me is that instead of just making up like fantasy factions or religions, this was very, 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 very clearly based on real world religions. So Maggie is Uadir. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Uadir. I'm assuming that's how you say it, but is meant to be Jewish, which I believe Alison Saft herself is Jewish, so I believe that this was kind of based on her experience a little bit. So Maggie is supposed to be Jewish. Wes is Sumic, which is Catholic, and he's also a Banvishman, which I believe is Irish. They live in New Albion, which is New York, and then there are the Catharists, which I believe is supposed to be Protestant. So these were all very clearly based on real world religions, which I think is kind of becoming something that I just don't want to read, because similar to the Foxglove King, this was also built on stereotypes, like very heavily. I appreciate that she was writing more so of her experience of anti-Semitism in that kind of a way. I can really appreciate that. But I don't love that both the Catholic and the Protestant religions were shown in a very dark, very negative light. Like there wasn't really any show of there being good Sumics or good Catharists. Like they were all bad. And I just didn't love the extremist view on that. Especially being Protestant myself, it was kind of like, And also because there were several Bible verses in this book that were, of course, not being quoted directly as like, oh, this is from Romans whatever, or this is from Galatians whatever. It was made up in their own way. In the beginning there was one, the one was all, and the all was one, and the all was within the one. But when God breathed over it, he created life. This is very clearly based on John 1 when it says in the beginning there was God, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and God creating the world in Genesis. So this was very clearly based on scripture. And then there was also another part at the end that was also very clearly based on scripture, but there were also little ways that it was being twisted, which wasn't great. But in the ending, one says, fear of the Lord is the foundation of understanding, which is based on Proverbs when it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So there was a lot of it that was obviously like, okay, this is very clearly based on scripture, but it was done so in some ways very perverted. My camera just overheated and shut off, so I'm not quite sure where I was going. But basically, I guess my main qualm with this book was that it was, again, very heavily built on religious stereotypes, especially because the author put in very obvious, blatant, like, scripture from the Bible, but then kind of twisted it and used her own words. And then there were also just references that kind of annoyed me, like Wes struggling with his belief in God, and then all of a sudden he would be like, but it turned out that like God is real, and she's standing right in front of him and like referring to Maggie, and it's like just that kind of stuff was annoying. Also because God was referenced as being an imperfect being, and that really annoyed me because to me, like, no. Basically, it's just that I think if authors are going to make a fantasy world and have it kind of reflect personal things, I think they should do so without being like blatant copies of real life things, if that makes sense. I found a review on Goodreads that I actually really loved because she kind of worded it a lot better than I am. The main problem here is that this book tries very hard to be about prejudice more than it's really about anything else, and it beats you over the head with it from the start without ever actually managing to say anything of substance. And I completely agree with that. There was nothing of substance really said in regard to prejudice. It was just like it being there occasionally. This basically tanked the whole book for me, not just because of the constant mealy-mouthed liberal sentiment being exposed. Wes's ultimate how to save the world ambition was to become a politician, but also because it dragged down the world building so much. The religious cultural groups in this are transposed extremely transparent from the real world. Like I had said, Sumic Catholic, Catharist Protestant, Uadir Jewish, and Banvish Irish. and it makes the entire setting feel inauthentic, superficial, and poorly conceived. In comparison, almost none of this book's universe is shown to the reader except for the bigotry that thrives within it on a social level, all of which is tied inextricably to the real-world historical context that it originates from, and makes very little sense without it unless you assume that this fictional world has more or less the same history as ours. And who wants that in fantasy unless it's satire? And that is exactly how I felt about this. So again, I think that there is a way to reflect your maybe religious trauma or your personal opinions and stuff, but I don't think the way to do it is to like completely 100% base your fantasy novel off of real religions. Like, to me, these were just really, they were too upfront, they were too in your face, and it was painting a very negative picture of Protestants and Catholics, which I just did not think was appropriate. And like I said, Protestants, it just showed Protestants as being very money hungry and horrible people. And with Catholics, it showed them as being very all about, you know, for your Pope and your superstitions and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just, I didn't love that. It kind of ruined it for me. I will say that I did like the slow burn between Maggie and Wes. That was really sweet, but it was also kind of hard to keep up with because I feel like Wes's personality was really like this. It was kind of hard to determine who he was because in one scene it's like you feel bad for him, he's like this sick little puppy, you know, and then all of a sudden he's really confident and like that it guy. So it was really hard to get to know Wes as a character. The ending with their romance was amazing though. I highlighted so much on one page because it was just so beautiful, and the whole theme of Wes basically begging Maggie, like, let me in, let me love you, and I just thought that was so beautiful, and I really enjoyed the way that their romance ended up being, and the ending was really sweet and beautiful. But I think overall just the religious aspect just kind of really brought this down for me, and also because, like I said, I was going into this expecting this to be an adventure, fun, hunting in the woods with a slow burn kind of a thing, and it wasn't. The hunt literally did not happen until the last, I don't know, like I said, 30 or 50 pages, not even. So that was a really big letdown. I guess this was just an okay book for me. I liked it, didn't love it, didn't hate it, but there was a lot that I didn't like. So I guess this was just kind of like a mid for me. I totally understand why people love it though. I have a few friends who absolutely adore this book and I can totally see why. But I think there were just the negative aspects were weighing a little too heavy for me to knock it up a star, if that makes sense. So again, we're all allowed to have our own opinions and we're all adults here and it's all okay. If you've read any of these books and you agree or disagree, feel free to let me know. I'd love to know everybody's thoughts and opinions on this kind of stuff. Again, we all see things from a totally different perspective, which I think is really cool. And I think that's what makes the book community so fun, is because we can read the exact same book and have totally different reviews on it because we just see things from a completely different worldview. So I hope that we can all come together on things that we disagree on and still choose to love each other and be friends, because that's what humanity is supposed to do, you know? So I'm really grateful that you guys have stuck around for this far, and if you watched the very end, can you leave a little candle emoji in the comments so I know that who watches these all the way through. And I'm so grateful for all of you anyway, and thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!